Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. If you'd like to follow along in the Quran, you're welcome to take a copy of the Mus'haf, inshallah ta'ala. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wa afdalu salati wa atammu taslimi ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. Allahumma akhrijna min dhulumatil wahm وأكرمنا بنور الفهم وافتح علينا بمعرفة العلم وحسن أخلاقنا بالحلم واجعلنا ممن يستمعون القول فيتبعون أحسنه. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accept from all of you all of the worship of this month. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accept our fasting. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accept our prayers. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala forgive our sins. And may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala help us renew our connection with His book, with the book of Quran, with the book of Allah, the book that was revealed in this month of Ramadan. Ramadan is an excellent time to reconnect with the book of Allah. As we talked about last weekend, how Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam himself used to increase his study of the Quran in the month of Ramadan, and the Sahaba and the Tabi'een, and this has been a tradition since then. And the fact that we strive to finish the recitation of the entire Quran in the month of Ramadan, this is all part of that. So because of that, I felt that it would be good for us to also study the Quran during these last 10 days, when the brothers asked me to do a series of talks after Asr. I thought about it, and I told them that I will do a study of the Quran, and I chose to go over some of the surahs of the Quran that most of us, if not all of us, have memorized. These are surahs that we recite every day in our prayers, the short surahs from the end of the Quran. And I believe that unfortunately many of us have not studied these surahs, even though we recite them in our prayers. And so I thought that together we can study these surahs, and hopefully it will help us have more khushu' in our prayers when we know what we are saying, what we are reciting. For those of us who have studied these surahs before, hopefully this will be a beneficial review for us, inshaAllah ta'ala. So I'm not intending to do the entire Juz Amma in the 10 days. That would be too fast. It's too much to cover. I don't think it'll be as beneficial. I would like to go slower, not too slow either, that it becomes boring and too much, but some sort of a middle path, inshallah ta'ala. And what I wanted to do was, instead of starting at Surah An-Naba, I decided to start at Surah An-Nas, because again the point is that many of us don't know the longer surahs of Juz Amma. We know the shorter surahs, and those are at the end. So because I want us to study the surahs that we recite in our daily prayers, I want to start at the end of Juz Amma. So I wanted to start with Surah An-Nas, and then go to Surah Al-Falaq, and then Surah Al-Ikhlas, and so on. But once I started preparing, I realized that it's difficult to do it that way. So instead what I have done is, I'm starting at Surah Al-Kafirun. Surah Al-Kafirun. And then we will do Surah Al-Nasr, and then Surah Al-Lahab, and then Surah Al-Ikhlas, and then Surah Al-Falaq, and then Surah An-Nas. And then we'll go back to Surah Al-Kawthar and move backwards. The reason is because the 4 Qul surahs are related to each other. So it's hard to talk about Surah An-Nas without talking about Falaq. It's hard to talk about Falaq without talking about Ikhlas. It's hard to talk about the 3 Quls without talking about Kafirun. So I thought I'll start with Kafirun, and then Ikhlas, Falaq, Nas. In between there is إِذَا جَاءَ نَصْرُ اللَّهِ and تَبَّتْ يَدَا أَبِي لَهَبٍ. So we will do these 6 surahs, inshaAllah ta'ala. And then hopefully, if we still have time, then we will go back to Kawthar and then work our way backwards, inshallah ta'ala. Before I begin, a few disclaimers, inshallah ta'ala. or a few, I guess, important points before we begin. Where am I getting my material from? I don't have any book in front of me except for the Mus'haf. So where am I getting my material from? Well, I have my notes here. So where did these notes come from? I don't really read modern tafasir that much. That's not to say there's no benefit in them. There is a lot of benefit in them, alhamdulillah. Everybody has a different interest. I tend to have an interest in the classical stuff. So everything that I'm going to be presenting to you, inshaAllah ta'ala, is taken from classical books of tafsir. For example, Tafsir ibn Kathir. For example, Tafsir al-Qurtubi. For example, Tafsir of Zamakhshari, Al-Kashaf. Tafsir of Al-Alusi, Al-Nasafi, Ibn Juzay. These are the main ones. Okay? So Tafsir ibn Kathir is the first one usually that I go to. And then after that I go to Tafsir al-Qurtubi. And then after that I usually go to the other ones like Nasafi, to him because he comes from a noble family. And his followers are increasing gradually. They came with this compromise offer. And the offer was that how about you worship our gods, you follow our religion for a year, and we worship your God and follow your religion for a year. And we alternate. 1 year we follow your religion, next year you follow our religion. 1 year we worship your God, next year you worship our gods. So let's do a compromise. We cannot completely stop you from preaching. You cannot convert all of us. It's not happening. So how about we compromise, we coexist, we live together, and there can be peace and everybody can be happy. So that was the compromise offer that they came with. And this surah was revealed as a response to that offer from the Quraysh. When this surah was revealed to the Prophet ﷺ, he went to the Kaaba, where these men of the Quraysh were gathered with other important figures in a gathering. And he went and he stood at their heads and he recited this surah as like a declaration, a response to their offer. And after he finished reciting this surah, then they understood basically that they had no hope of convincing him with any sort of a compromise. And after that, they even increased in their persecution and animosity against the Prophet ﷺ and his companions, which ultimately led to his migration out of Mecca to Medina. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, by revealing this surah, is teaching us that there are certain things on which we cannot compromise on. There are certain things on which we cannot compromise. Okay? This is not an issue on which you compromise. Worship God, who you worship, how you worship. This is not something that is compromisable in our deen. But shaitan, sometimes tries to tempt us to compromise our values, to win the other side over. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala warns us in Surah Al-Baqarah, يَا أَيُّهَا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا ادْخُلُوا فِي السِّلْمِ كَافَّةً وَلَا تَتَّبِعُوا خُطُوَاتِ الشَّيْطَانِ إِنَّهُ لَكُمْ عَدُوٌّ مُبِينٌ. O you who believe, enter into Islam completely, and do not follow the footsteps of shaitan, which indicates that not entering into Islam completely to be partially Muslim, or to be Muslim one day and not be a Muslim the next day, this is following the footsteps of shaitan. So this is really the theme of the surah, the main message of the surah, and we'll talk more about that if we have time at the end, inshallah ta'ala. So the surah starts out by saying قُل, which means say. قُل يَا أَيُّهَا الْكَافِرُونَ, say, O you disbelievers. Let me do a quick translation and then I'll come back and go word by word. Say, قُلْ يَا أَيُّهَا الْكَافِرُونَ. Say, O disbelievers, لَا أَعْبُدُ مَا تَعْبُدُونَ. I do not worship what you worship. وَلَا أَنْتُمْ عَابِدُونَ مَا أَعْبُدُ. And you do not worship what I worship. وَلَا أَنَا عَابِدٌ مَا عَبَدْتُمْ. And I am not a worshipper of what you worship. وَلَا أَنْتُمْ عَابِدُونَ مَا أَعْبُدُ. And you are not worshippers of what I worship. لَكُمْ دِينُكُمْ وَلِيَ دِينٌ. To me is my deen and to you is your deen. To you is your deen and to me is my deen. So it starts out by saying قُل. قُل means say. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling the Prophet ﷺ to say the following words to the disbelievers. And when he tells him to say that, the word قُل is becoming part of the surah. He's not just saying to the Prophet ﷺ, say, and then the Prophet ﷺ comes and says, Ya ayyuhal kafirun. He says, قُل. The word قُل is retained in the surah. Even though when the Prophet ﷺ is addressing them, he's not telling them to say. Allah has told him to say. Like if you told me, tell them this and this, I wouldn't go and tell them this and this. Like if you told me, tell them i'tikaf starts tonight. Shaykh Arsalan, go tell them i'tikaf starts tonight. I don't go and I say, tell them i'tikaf starts tonight. I just say, i'tikaf starts tonight. But here, the Prophet ﷺ, when he goes and he recites it to them, he says, say, Ya ayyuhal kafirun. He retains, so the qul becomes part of the surah. It's not just a command from Allah Azza wa Jalla to the Prophet ﷺ to tell them, but it is part of the surah. Why? What's the wisdom here? Because the point is that the listeners need to know that this is not coming from the Prophet ﷺ. He's being told to say that. He's being told to say that. Why? Because the Quraysh had come to the Prophet ﷺ with this offer. As if the Prophet ﷺ can make that decision by himself? No, he cannot. So Allah wants to drive this home, that this is not something that the Prophet ﷺ decides on his own. Anything that he says is coming from me. So when he says, قُلْ يَا أَيُّهَا الْكَافِرُونَ, it drives this point home into the mind of the listener that, look, everything that is coming from the mouth of the Prophet ﷺ, he's not making his own decisions. He's not coming up with his own preaching. This is all coming from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Okay? So this is why the word قُلْ is retained here. But there's another reason why also. Look, the surah is very harsh. Okay, this is one of the harsher surahs of the Quran. And we'll explain why, inshallah. It's a very harsh surah with a very strong message. Allah Azza wa Jal is showing His displeasure with the disbelievers. And so, when He says, قُلْ يَا أَيُّهَا الْكَافِرُونَ, Allah is not addressing the disbelievers directly. He's addressing them through the Prophet ﷺ. When I'm upset with someone, وَتَعَالَى اللَّهُ عَنِ الْأَمْثَالِ, when I'm upset with someone, I don't want to talk to them directly. I want to convey a message to them through someone else. And if I can't find anybody else, I'll pull out my phone and send a text message or send an email, but I will not call them and talk to them directly. I will not go and say it to them face to face, because I am unhappy with them, I'm angry with them. So Allah Azza wa Jal is showing His anger for these people by not addressing them directly, but by addressing the Prophet ﷺ, telling him, you go and tell them that. قُلْ يَا أَيُّهَا الْكَافِرُونَ قُلْ. So that's the other reason why قُلْ is used. And a third reason that the ulama also mention, which is something very beautiful. Because the message of the surah is harsh, the personality of the Prophet ﷺ was not harsh. We know that. He was sent as a rahma lil alameen, right? He was sent as a mercy to the world. The personality of the Prophet ﷺ is not harsh. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, فَبِمَا رَحْمَةٍ مِّنَ اللَّهِ لِنْتَ لَهُمْ وَلَوْ كُنْتَ فَضًّا غَلِيظَ الْقَلْبِ لَانْفَضُّوا مِنْ حَوْلِكَ. That it is by the grace of Allah that you are soft with them. And if you had been harsh and hard with them, they would run away from you. So the Prophet ﷺ's nature and his da'wah was always soft and gentle. Right? Because this surah contains a message that is contrary to the personality of the Prophet ﷺ, Allah Azza wa Jal is commanding him, go and say this. I am telling you to go and say this. Even though, yes, this is not your personality, you have to say this. قُلْ يَا أَيُّهَا الْكَافِرُونَ. So this is a command from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to the Prophet ﷺ. This is not the time for compassion and gentleness. This is the time to say it as it is. Go and tell them. قُلْ يَا أَيُّهَا الْكَافِرُونَ. Now, Ya ayyuhal kafirun, I translated it as, O disbelievers, right? But in Arabic, there's Ya and there's Ya ayyuha. Like if I want to say, Ya fulan, Ya Zaid, Ya Umar, right? I say Ya. Or if I want to say, Ya insan, Ya rajul, O man, O human being, right? Or I want, if somebody is addressing the Prophet ﷺ, they say, Ya Rasulullah, right? Or Ya Nabi Allah. Right? So what's the difference between Ya and Ya ayyuha? Because Allah Azza wa Jal uses both. He says, Ya ayyuhan nabi, Ya ayyuhan rasul, Ya ayyuhan nas, Ya ayyuhal kafirun. What's the difference between Ya and Ya ayyuha? Ya is more informal. Ya is more informal. Ayyuha, Ya ayyuha is more formal. So when Allah Azza wa Jal says, Ya ayyuhan nabi, O Prophet, there's formality there, there's respect there. Okay? Nabi is being placed on a high pedestal. Ya ayyuhan nas, there's respect, that's a formal address. But if he were to say Ya Nabi Allah, there's more intimacy there. Ya Nabi Allah versus Ya ayyuhan Nabi, there's respect there. Okay? Like if I'm talking to my friend and I say Ya Rajul, Ya Rajul, that's more intimate talk. But if I say Ya ayyuha Rajul, I'm placing him, I'm elevating him. That's one meaning of ayyuha. But another meaning of ayyuha is when you distance yourself from someone else. When you say Ya ayyuha, you are distancing yourself from them. And also when you're respecting someone, you're elevating above, so you're also kind of creating a distance between you and them. But ayyuha is used also to create a distance between you and the listener. And here again, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is distancing himself from the kuffar, from the disbelievers. Ya ayyuhal kafirun. You are far away from me, you're distanced from me because of the crimes that you are committing. So immediately when the address comes as Ya ayyuhal kafirun, the listeners can feel that someone is upset. Ayyuhal kafirun, he's distancing himself from them. But the other thing here is that Allah Azza wa Jal calls them al-kafirun. Al-kafirun. What's the meaning of kafirun? The word kafirun comes from the word kufr. And the word kufr means to, literally, to cover. To cover. But in the Quran, the word kafara most of the time means to reject. To reject. Okay? So when someone rejects the truth, they are doing kufr, kafara. Because the kuffar, they rejected the truth of the Prophet ﷺ, they're called kuffar. Okay, rejectors of faith. But kufr has another meaning. And that is not to reject the truth, but to reject someone's favor upon you. If someone has done a favor to you, right, and you acknowledge that favor, you are being shakir. You're being thankful, you're being grateful. The opposite of shukr is also kufr. To be ungrateful, to reject, to deny someone's favor upon you is also kufr. And these people are called ayyuhal kafirun because they rejected the favor of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala upon them, the favors that He has given them, because they do not worship Him alone, they associate partners with Him, so they are ungrateful to Allah Azza wa Jal for all of His favors to them, and they have also rejected the truth of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Now, why does Allah Azza wa Jal say Ya ayyuhal kafirun and He doesn't say Ya ayyuhal ladhina kafaru? Because most of the time in the Quran, when He addresses the disbelievers, He says, الَّذِينَ كَفَرُوا, those who rejected faith. Versus al-kafirun, the disbelievers. أَيُّهَا الَّذِينَ كَفَرُوا would mean, O you who have disbelieved. أَيُّهَا الْكَافِرُونَ means, O disbelievers. What's the difference here? The difference is that when you say الَّذِينَ كَفَرُوا, you're using a verb. Those who disbelieved, past tense verb. Those who disbelieved, كَفَرُوا, past tense verb. Okay? فعل ماضي. But here, أيها الكافرون, you're using a noun. Disbelievers, this is a noun. This is an ism, fa'il. Okay? And the difference in the Arabic language, when you use a verb, it's different from when you use a noun. Because a verb is an action. An action is something that you might do sometimes, you may not do at other times. But when you are called with a quality, like sadiq, like alim, like musalli, like sa'im, this is now your quality, you're doing it regularly and constantly. When you are sa'im, you're sa'im from the morning to evening, not just for a part of the day. But ana asumu, I'm fasting right now. I don't know if I'll fast next hour or not. Okay? So the verb, by definition, does not show constancy. It's a temporal thing. But a noun indicates that this attribute is a constant attribute. It is ingrained in this person. So Allah Azza wa Jalla is calling them al-kafirun because these people are cemented in their kufr. That's the idea. That these people are cemented in their kufr. And this is tough language. This is tough language. The Prophet ﷺ knew that they hated to be labeled kafirun. They didn't like it. They knew the connotations of it. So the kuffar of Quraysh, they didn't like to be called kuffar and kafirun. So the fact that He is speaking to them with this label that He knows they don't like, this is harsh, this is tough language. And that's why I said what I said earlier, that Allah Azza wa Jalla is telling him, قُل, say it to them. Okay, this is harsh language, this is a very tough surah. Now, قُل يَا أَيُّهَا الْكَافِرُونَ. Which kafirun is He addressing? Is He addressing all the kafirun of the world? Is He addressing all the kafirun of Arabia? Is He addressing all the kafirun of Mecca? Or is He addressing a specific group of kafirun? The ulama say, the mufassirun say, المخاطبون كفر مخصوصون قد علم الله منهم أنهم لا يؤمنون. And this is very crucial. I'll tell you why in a minute. They say that the addressees are specific group of disbelievers. Specific group of disbelievers about whom Allah knew that they will not believe. This is a group of people about whom Allah knew that they will not believe. And I told you that those people who had come with that proposal to the Prophet ﷺ, they all died in the Battle of Badr as disbelievers, like Abu Jahl and others. Okay? So, these are a specific group of people, not all the kuffar. This surah is not addressing those kuffar who will believe later. This surah is not addressing those kuffar who are not showing enmity to the Prophet ﷺ. This is not addressing them. The harshness that is carried in this surah is not for them. There's other parts of the Quran that deal with those people. Okay? This surah is addressing a specific group of the kuffar, not all the groups of the kuffar, about whom Allah Azza wa Jal knew that they will not believe. These were people who were bent on rejecting the best possible da'wah that there can be. They have been rejecting the da'wah of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. I mean, can you imagine, we talk about the du'at of today, the Islamic callers of today, and how great their speeches are, and how good they are with presenting Islam to people and so on, how gentle they are, how kind they are, how eloquent they are. Can you imagine the da'wah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam? There is no better da'wah than his. Okay? And that was the da'wah that was presented to them, and they rejected that. Okay? And not just rejected that once or twice. They rejected that for years. For years the Prophet ﷺ has been living with them day and night and calling them to this, and they have been bent on rejecting this da'wah, which is the best possible da'wah. So after all these years have passed, that is when Allah Azza wa Jal reveals this surah, knowing that that's it. These people are not going to change. Alright? So this is the backdrop of this surah. This is the context of the surah. This is why the surah is so harsh and so strong. قُلْ يَا أَيُّهَا الْكَافِرُونَ. And this is why, even though Allah knows and the Prophet ﷺ know that they're not going to like what they hear, but it is what it is. It is what it is. They need to know that there is no compromise here. We're not going to compromise, and we know that they're not going to change, and they will face the consequences of that, as the last ayah is going to say. لا أعبد ما تعبدون. I do not worship your idols. لا أعبد ما تعبدون. I do not worship what you worship. لا أعبد ما تعبدون also means I am not enslaved to what you are enslaved to. Because abada, abd is a slave. And abid is a worshipper. From the same root, abada. Abada means to worship, and it also means to be a slave of. Right? So, لا أعبد ما تعبدون means I do not worship what you worship. You worship idols, I worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I do not worship what you worship. And I am not a slave of that which you are a slave of. I am a slave of Allah. You are a slave of your desires. You are a slave of your traditions, your cultures. You are a slave of all these things. I am a slave of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I am not a slave of what you are a slave of. لا أعبد ما تعبدون. ولا أنتم عابدون ما أعبد. And you are not worshippers of what I worship. You are not worshippers of what I worship. ولا أنتم عابدون ما أعبد. ولا أنا عابد ما عبدتم. And I am not a worshipper of what you worship. ولا أنتم عابدون ما أعبد. And you are not worshippers of what I worship. There's repetition here, right? There's repetition here. Why is there repetition here? The ulama talk about that as well. What is the reason for repetition? And there are different opinions about that. There are different opinions about that. One opinion is that the repetition is simply there for emphasis. Okay? The repetition is simply there for emphasis. Allah Azza wa Jal is showing His anger in this surah. He's being harsh in this surah. And they had come with a ridiculous proposal, and they had repeated the proposal to the Prophet ﷺ also. So to respond to that with full force, he repeats himself to emphasize the truth of what he's saying. That there's no way. They cannot worship the same. They cannot worship one day this person, or this religion, one day that religion. There are two different ways of life. I do not worship what you worship. So repetition is there for emphasis. That's one opinion. The other opinion is that it's not just there for emphasis, but the meaning is slightly different. First, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is negating the object of worship, and then He negates the way of worship. What do I mean by that? First, when He says, لا أعبد ما تعبدون, He's saying, say to them, I do not worship what you worship. But when He says, وَلَا أَنَا عَابِدٌ مَا عَبَدْتُمْ, He's saying, and I do not worship in the way that you worship. Because مَا عَبَدْتُمْ, مَا here is مصدرية, they say. This ma here is مصدرية. أي وَلَا أَنَا عَابِدٌ عِبَادَتَكُمْ. وَلَا أَنَا عَابِدٌ عِبَادَتَكُمْ, meaning that I do not worship in the way that you worship. My worship, my style of worship is different. When I worship, I only call upon Allah Azza wa Jal. When you worship, you go and you wipe over these idols. When you make tawaf around the Kaaba, you go and wipe the idols. That's what they used to do. They used to have all these idols, and they used to wipe them and make sujood to them and so on. When they used to go around the Kaaba, they used to do that sometimes naked, without any clothes. I don't worship in that way. I don't worship Allah in that way. So I don't worship in the way that you worship. What I worship is different from what you worship. And the way that I worship is different from the way that you worship. Okay? So the two the two things, they're repeated, but the meaning is slightly different, they say. The first time it emphasizes one meaning, and the second time is to emphasize the other meaning. And the third opinion, they say, is that once the Prophet, once Allah Azza wa Jal is negating the future, and the other time He's negating the present or past. Okay? So when He says, for example, La a'budu ma ta'budun, He's negating the present. But then when He says again, Wala ana a'bidum ma a'badtum, He's negating the future. Or, some of them said, the first time He's negating the future, and the second time He's negating the past. La a'budu ma ta'budun is negating the future. Wala ana a'bidum ma a'badtum is negating the past. What do I mean by that? Negating the past, present, future? Basically, one time He's saying this, I do not worship what you worship, in the present. I do not worship what you worship. The other time He's saying, I will not worship what you worship. I will never worship what you worship. I don't do it now, and I will never do it in the future. Okay? Or the past. I have never worshipped what you worship. وَلَا أَنَا عَابِدٌ مَا عَبَدتُّمْ. I have never worshipped what you worship. How come you're asking me to worship your idols? I have never worshipped the idols. Because the Prophet ﷺ, we know, he never worshipped idols. Even before he became a prophet, even though he lived, born and raised in that society, he never worshipped an idol. Okay? So he's saying, I didn't worship idols before I became a prophet. How do you expect me to worship idols now, after I become a prophet? I have never worshipped these idols. And I will never worship them. And you do not worship what I worship, and you will never worship what I worship. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows that these people, they will never worship the God of Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. So, the repetition is there for these different reasons. And this is what the ulama have pointed out. The last ayah says, لَكُمْ دِينُكُمْ وَلِيَ دِينٌ. لَكُمْ دِينُكُمْ وَلِيَ دِينٌ, which I translated as, to you is your religion and to me is my religion. Or for you is your religion, for me is my religion. لَكُمْ دِينُكُمْ. For you is your religion. It's different from saying دِينُكُمْ لَكُمْ. If I say هذه الورقة لي, this page is mine. It's different from saying لي هذه الورقة. Mine is this piece of paper. What's the difference? In the Arabic language, if I say this book is yours, it's different from saying yours is this book. When I say yours is this book, I'm implying that this book is only yours and nobody else can have it. Okay? It's only yours and nobody else can have it. That's why when I say إِيَّاكَ نَعْبُدُ, you do we worship. Instead of saying نَعْبُدُكَ, we worship you. We say what? You do we worship. What's the implication there? We only worship you, we don't worship anybody else. إِيَّاكَ نَسْتَعِينُ, we say. We don't say نَسْتَعِينُكَ, which would mean we seek your help. We don't say we seek your help, we say your help we seek. In other words, we don't seek anybody else's help, we only seek your help. Okay? So, this is called تقديم الجار والمجرور يفيد القصر. This is a rule in the Arabic language. تقديم الجار والمجرور يفيد القصر والحصر. That when it's said this way, instead of saying دينكم لكم, which would mean your religion is yours, instead of saying that, when he says لكم دينكم, that means that your religion is only yours. That's only yours. It can never be mine. I can never have a share in that religion. It's too despicable for me to even touch it. You keep it. It's yours. I don't want any of it. No, thank you. It's yours. Keep it. لَكُمْ دِينُكُمْ وَلِيَ دِينٌ. And for me is my religion. Now here, وَلِيَ دِينٌ, it's supposed to be وَلِيَ دِينِي. وَلِيَ دِينِي. Okay? Or وَلِي دِينِي. وَلِي دِينِي. To me is my deen. Deeni. Why is it deen instead of deeni? We'll come to that in a second. Okay? Why is it waliya deen instead of wali deen? Okay? In some of the qira'at, it's wali deen. Wali deen. But in Hafs, it's waliya deen. Because it's difficult to say wali deen. It's too much E. So to make it easier, it's waliya deen, just to make it easier to pronounce. Okay, but some of the other qira'at do say wali deen. It doesn't change the meaning. But deeni, the ya is dropped there. Okay, the ya is dropped there. Why is the ya dropped there? Well, there are multiple reasons that the ulama have mentioned. One reason is to simply maintain the meter. Kafirun, ta'budun, deen. If it became deeni, everything is ending with sukoon. Right? Kafirun, ta'budun, a'budtum, a'bud, deen. If it became deeni, it would end with a vowel. Okay? So it doesn't sound as nice. And the Arabs did that. It's very common. The Arabs used to drop letters to maintain the rhyme. It's very common among the Arabs. And it's also common in the Quran. It happens. وَمَا خَلَقْتُ الْجِنَّ وَالْإِنسَ إِلَّا لِيَعْبُدُونَ. It's supposed to be يَعْبُدُونِي. يَعْبُدُونَ. Okay? So that's one reason that the ulama have mentioned that the ya is dropped. But another reason, which is very, subhanAllah, beautiful. Ya, what does ya mean? What does that mean? Mine, right? Mine. Mine. It's referred to me. The surah is emphasizing that it is from who? This message is from who? From Allah. From the very beginning. Qul. Qul. Remember what I said about Qul? That Allah is giving this idea that this is from Allah. It's not from you, Ya Rasulullah. It's from Allah. So if the whole idea is to tell them that this is from Allah, the I is removed. The I of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam is removed. Even the pronoun me is removed. Deeni, just remove the me part. To emphasize there is no me, this is all from Allah. And if you notice even in ayah number 4, وَلَا أَنَا عَابِدٌ مَا عَبَدْتُمْ, there's an I there too. Right? وَلَا أَنَا عَابِدٌ مَا عَبَدْتُمْ, I am not a worshipper of what you worship. There's an I there too. Right? But that I have to be mentioned. I cannot work without the ana. But ana becomes ana. It's supposed to be ana, ana. But there's a circle above the alif. You see that in the Mus'haf? Ana. And we pronounce it ana. We don't say ana. We don't say wala ana abidum ma abadtum. Why don't we pronounce that alif? There's alif is written there, but it's not pronounced. Why isn't it pronounced? To take away from the I-ness of the I. To take away from the I-ness of the I. Instead of saying, I do not worship what you worship, it's like saying, I do not worship. Like, I'm hiding myself. I'm hiding that I. Because this surah is from Allah Azza wa Jalla, a message to the disbelievers to tell them that this is from Allah. So the I is removed. So the ya is removed also with that wisdom at the end. Lakum deenukum waliyadeen. What does deen mean? Deen we translate as religion. I know we're out of time. I'll finish in just 3-4 minutes, inshallah ta'ala. Deen is translated as religion, right? But the word deen comes from the same root as the word dain. Deen and dain come from the same root. And dain means what? Dain. Who knows? Dain means loan. Okay? Loan. Dain means loan. So loan is something that you have to pay back, right? You have to pay back. And therefore deen has that meaning of payback. That's why Yawmiddin, Maliki Yawmiddin. The day of judgment is also called Yawmiddin, the day of recompense, the day of payback. Because deen has to do with payback. So the idea here is Lakum Deenukum Waliya Deen. You will get your payback and I will get my payback. Allah will pay you back for what you are doing and I will be paid back for what I'm doing. Lakum Deenukum Waliya Deen. You will have your recompense, I will have my recompense. So to conclude, inshaAllah ta'ala, the end of the surah is not saying, oh, everybody can just believe whatever they want to believe. It's all good. Every path leads to God. Right? Lakum Deenukum Waliya Deen. You follow your way, I follow my way. In the end, we'll all meet in Jannah. No, it's not like that. That's not what the ayah is saying. The ayah is saying you're free to believe and do what you want to do, but you will face the consequences of what you're doing, and I will face the consequences of what I'm doing. We're not all going to Jannah following these two different paths. The path to Allah is one, and that is the path of Islam. Okay? But you don't want to follow this path in this life. You're free. Allah has given you that freedom of choice. But the consequence you will have to face. لَكُمْ دِينُكُمْ وَلِيَ دِينِ. And of course, it also shows that I am not going to compromise on these crucial matters. And I close with this, inshaAllah ta'ala, that this is the main theme of the surah. That there are certain things on which we do not compromise. We do not compromise. There are certain things on which we do not compromise. And there are other things on which we may compromise. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam at some times did compromise with the Quraysh. Didn't he? He made certain compromises with the Quraysh. What's the first example that comes to mind? Hudaybiyah. Remember what happened in Hudaybiyah? The whole contract and what happened during those negotiations. You remember how the conditions that they placed and how the Sahaba were so unhappy about that, and Ali didn't want to erase it. You know, the whole thing. And then Umar, what he did after the Prophet ﷺ signed the agreement, how upset he was and how he said some things that he regretted later in his life, and the companions didn't want to slaughter their animals because they were so flabbergasted by this agreement, this compromise that the Prophet ﷺ had made. He made a compromise there. He compromised certain things. He erased his own name. He erased Rasulullah. He erased it from the paper after it was already written. He erased Ar-Rahman Ar-Rahim. He compromised. Okay, write Bismikallahum. Write Muhammad ibn Abdullah. He made those compromises. But here there's no compromise, which shows there's certain things on which we can compromise, and there's other things on which we cannot compromise. There are certain constant values of our deen that there's no compromise on. We don't compromise haya. We don't compromise haya to gain a victory for Muslims. We don't compromise truth, justice, fairness. We don't compromise. We don't compromise monotheism. We don't compromise. There are certain things on which we do not compromise. There are other things on which we may compromise. What are the things on which we can compromise, and what are the things on which we cannot compromise? That comes with learning the deen. That's why we have to learn the deen before we become activists. Or if not before we become activists, as we are activists, whatever activism that we do as MSAs, as different organizations out there that do good Islamic activism work, with that we have to learn our deen. Otherwise, we compromise on the wrong values to gain victories, quote unquote, for Islam and Muslims. We cannot compromise on certain values. Somebody could argue that at that time when they said to the Prophet ﷺ, you can worship our Lord 1 year, we can worship your Lord 1 year, that's a good compromise. Because at least he will get to do that 1 year. Right now he's not even getting to do that any year. He'll get to do that peacefully. He'll have peace for 1 year. That's better than not having any peace. Somebody could argue it that way. But this is not a compromisable issue. Not every victory for Islam and Muslims is taken for giving up, if it means giving up certain core, constant, non-compromisable values of our deen. This is important why we learn our deen, brothers and sisters. So I'm going to throw a plug in here for the Marifah program under the Taqwa Seminary. We're offering courses in Islamic sciences in the masjid under the Marifah program. The flyers are outside on the table. Please, look at the program, go to the website, look at the course curriculum, look at the schedule, and if it fits your schedule, please register. The upcoming class is on the Quran. We will talk about things about the Quran that people have misunderstood. Charges from the Orientalists, misconceptions from the extremist groups about even this ayah, this surah that we read today. The extremists have used this surah in a way that it is not intended. They will say, it says, look, it says, قُلْ يَا أَيُّهَا الْكَافِرُونَ لَا أَعْبُدُ مَا تَعْبُدُونَ. So that's how we should address all the kuffar. And what did I start with at the beginning? This is not addressing all the kuffar. This is addressing a select group of the kuffar. We don't speak in this manner with the kuffar that are standing side by side with us and supporting our cause. For them, there are other ayat in the Quran. And that's why our ulama, like Ibn Abidin says in his Hashiyah, that it is not permissible for a Muslim to say to a dhimmi, Ya kafir. To the non-Muslims who live peacefully in a Muslim Islamic state, it is not permissible for us to call them Ya kafir, even though they are kuffar. They are. But we know that it hurts them, it offends them. There's no need to offend them. They're living peacefully with us. They're not showing enmity to us. They're not at war with us. They're not persecuting us. So with them, you don't apply every part of the Quran to everyone. There are certain parts of the Quran that are specific to certain groups, and there are other parts of the Quran that are more general. And all of that comes by learning our deen, by going back to the tafasir, by looking at what our ulama have said, and not just interpreting the words of Allah Azza wa Jal by ourselves. That is the mistake of the extremists, and that is the mistake of the hyper-liberals. And the true path and the correct path is the path in between. May Allah Azza wa Jal teach us that which is beneficial and help us benefit from what He teaches us. Allahumma ja'alna mimman yastami'una al-qawla fayattabi'una ahsana. Wallahu ta'ala alam wa sallallahu wa sallim wa barik ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi aj'een. Subhanaka Allahumma wa bihamdik. Ashhadu an la ilaha illa ant. Nastaghfiruka wa natubu ilayk. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.